Isla Ramirez adjusted the straps on her heels as the elevator climbed to the 39th floor of Vance Enterprises. The gleaming skyscraper pierced the Manhattan sky, its glass windows glinting in the afternoon sun. She was still getting used to it, the speed, the pressure, the wealth swirling around her like perfume. But she'd made it, from her tiny apartment in Harlem to the heart of one of the most powerful corporations in New York. "Third day," she whispered under her breath, her reflection catching in the mirror-polished elevator door. "Don't screw this up." The elevator pinged open, and she stepped into the modern, open-concept office space, sleek black furniture, marble floors, greenery climbing sculptural metal walls. Alexander Vance didn't just run his company, he made sure every corner reflected his vision, efficient, minimalist, powerful. She passed the executive lounge and made her way to her desk just outside his office. It was eerily quiet. Most of the team had gone for the day. A late board meeting had kept Alexander at the downtown location earlier, which meant Isla finally had time to breathe and organize the chaotic files she'd inherited from the last assistant. But first, she needed to change. Her dress was soaked. A nervous spill earlier in the break room left a streak of coffee down the front of her emerald green dress. She had a backup outfit in her locker, and there was a private dressing room behind the executive lounge she had spotted earlier, a leftover from a media shoot the week before. She assumed it was still unused. Isla slipped inside and shut the door behind her. The room was softly lit with mirrored panels and a white velvet chaise in the corner. A clothes rack stood by the far wall. She unzipped her damp dress and let it fall to the floor, reaching for the fresh black wrap dress she brought. As she slipped her arms into the sleeves, the door opened. She froze. He froze. Alexander Vance stood in the doorway, a file in hand, his ocean blue eyes widening in shock. For a moment, less than 2 seconds, they locked eyes. Isla's back was mostly to him, the curve of her bare shoulder still exposed, her dress only half on. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him. Silence. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a fist. She quickly yanked the wrap dress around her body and secured the tie at her waist, face burning so hot it made her dizzy. How the hell had that happened? Why hadn't she locked the door? Why hadn't he knocked? When she stepped out minutes later, Alexander's office door was ajar, light spilling into the hallway. She took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," came the low, composed voice. She entered. Alexander was standing by the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the fading light. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, vest unbuttoned. The image of corporate elegance. "I'm so sorry about earlier," she said quickly, clutching her clipboard to her chest like a shield. "I didn't know that dressing room was in use. I assumed—" "You assumed correctly," he interrupted, turning toward her. His face was unreadable. "No one uses that space anymore. I only went in to retrieve a file from the cabinet inside. I should have knocked." A pause. "I didn't see much. Just enough to know you're braver than most would be in that moment." That caught her off guard. Isla blinked. Braver. "You didn't scream," he said, a hint of a smile flickering at the edge of his lips. "Most people would have screamed. You just looked startled, and then composed. That's rare." She exhaled slowly, trying not to let the tension rise in her chest. "Maybe I'm just used to chaos." Another pause. He stepped closer. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I want to be clear about that." "I know," she said softly, meeting his gaze. It lingered. Something shifted in the room. Alexander had always struck her as impossibly collected, almost cold. The kind of man who built an empire brick by brick without ever showing a crack. But now, up close, something in his eyes flickered, a faint, restrained heat. "Will there be anything else tonight?" she asked, breaking the silence. He cleared his throat. "No, that's all. Thank you, Isla." She nodded and turned to leave, her steps steady, even though her insides still trembled. When she got back to her apartment, her roommate Nina was already curled up on the couch with a face mask and a glass of wine. "Girl, you look like you saw a ghost," Nina said, popping up. "You good?" Isla dropped her bag by the door and collapsed on the chair. I didn't see a ghost, but my boss saw me. Changing. Nina choked on her wine. What? I thought I was alone. It was a media room with a closet. No one's been using it. He walked in. Was he creepy? No, Isla said, frowning. That's the weird part. He was respectful, quiet, left immediately. But then? He looked at me differently. Not like I was just an assistant. More like a woman. Nina whistled low. Girl, this is either a disaster waiting to happen or the plot of a sexy-ass Netflix movie. Isla laughed despite herself. Or both. Meanwhile, several floors above the city, Alexander stood on his penthouse balcony, nursing a glass of bourbon. The skyline shimmered in the distance, headlights streaming across bridges like molten gold. But his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about her, not just her body, though the image had been seared into his brain with agonizing clarity, but her calmness, her lack of panic, the way she held her ground. It wasn't embarrassment he saw in her eyes. It was fire. He hadn't felt that kind of stir in years. Since Madeline, and that had ended in betrayal, public scandal, and $1 million settlement. After that, he'd sworn off emotional entanglements, especially with anyone in his company. But Isla was different, and that terrified him more than he'd admit, because Alexander Vance was a man who didn't look twice, and tonight he'd looked back, twice. The next morning, Isla stepped into the office with a fresh blowout, red lipstick, and her head held high. She would not shrink. She would not be reduced to the girl the CEO accidentally saw undressed. She'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, and climbed too far to let one moment, however intimate, however searing, define her place here. "Morning, Isla," came a voice from the side hallway. Jasper, a junior strategist, offered her a friendly smile. "You're glowing today." "Maybe I finally slept," she quipped, flashing her teeth as she slid into her seat. But her smile faded the moment Alexander Vance stepped out of the elevator. God, he looked dangerous in charcoal grey. No tie today, collar slightly open. His stride was effortless, but his eyes found hers instantly. Just a flicker, barely a second, but it was enough. She swallowed and dropped her gaze to her planner. In meetings, he was all business. Calm, calculated, brilliant. Isla took notes so fast her wrist ached. But between the discussions and PowerPoints, she caught it again, the glances, lingering a little too long, a pause before he answered her, a tightening of his jaw when Jasper leaned a little too close to whisper a question to her. By the end of the day, the air between them was charged like a summer storm. "Mr. Vance wants to see you," said Lorraine, his senior secretary, as Isla was packing her things. Isla hesitated. "Now?" Lorraine nodded. "He's in the conference room. Alone." Of course he is, Isla thought. She knocked once before entering. Alexander stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the city like it belonged to him. In some ways it did. "Sit," he said, not unkindly. She did. "I've reviewed your internal assessments," he said, turning toward her. "You're overqualified for this role." Isla blinked. "Excuse me. I've seen your education, your side projects, even a few sketches you left in the printer last week." She stiffened. "Those were personal." "They were good," he said. "Damn good." His eyes met hers again, intense and unreadable. "You don't belong behind a desk managing my schedule, Isla. You should be leading creative. I applied for assistant because I needed the job." "I know, but I'm offering you something more." A pause. He stepped closer, but not too close. Just enough that she felt the heat of him. "I want you to help lead a new fashion initiative we're launching. The Emerge Project. Sustainable, local, minority-focused. I want your vision, your design eye." Her breath caught. "Why me?" "Because you're not afraid to challenge me," he said quietly. "And because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that moment." Silence. Isla's heart slammed so hard, she thought he might hear it. "I know this could be seen as inappropriate," he added, But I'm not asking you to sleep with me. I'm asking you to trust that I see your talent, and I want it on this team." She stood slowly. "And if I say no?" "You keep your job," he said. "But I'll regret it." Her eyes searched his, looking for deception, for arrogance, for a trap. But she found none. "I'll think about it," she said, and walked out. 2 weeks later, the gala at the Glass House was a spectacle of polished steel, velvet gowns, and whispered power. The Emerge project was being unveiled to investors and media, and Isla was one of its featured talents, by name. Her black silk gown hugged her body, the high slit showcasing her honey-toned legs. The neckline plunged just enough to be bold, not desperate. Her natural curls were pinned up with gold combs, highlighting the regal lines of her face. She didn't just look like she belonged, she looked like she owned the room. Alexander saw her from across the floor, mid-conversation with a board member, his breath caught in his throat. She was a vision. She hadn't told him what she was wearing, he hadn't seen the final dress, but now he couldn't look away. As she moved across the room, other men noticed. Heads turned, eyes lingered, especially one. Logan Rayner, an arrogant exec with old money and a mouth that didn't know when to stop, approached Isla at the champagne table. "Well, well," Logan said, raising his glass. "Didn't expect the assistant to clean up like this. Looks like someone's sleeping their way into fashion." Isla's smile didn't waver. "No, Logan. Just working circles around people like you." Logan chuckled. "Feisty. I like it." "She said she's not interested," came Alexander's voice, cold and clear. Logan turned, a flash of surprise, then discomfort, as Alexander stepped between them. "Find another target," he said, "before I make you regret it." Logan scoffed, muttered something about power trips, and disappeared into the crowd. "You didn't have to do that," Isla said, not meeting his eyes. "Actually, I did." A beat passed. Then he offered her his arm. "Walk with me." They exited onto the rooftop terrace, where the city lights shimmered like fireflies below them. "You're stunning," he said, voice low. "You know that, don't you?" Isla exhaled. "I thought we were being professional." "We were." "Then what was that? Inside? The way you looked at me?" He hesitated, then turned toward her, stepping closer. "I'm trying, Isla. I'm trying to be the man who deserves to work beside you, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't want more." She held his gaze, unwavering. "So, what happens now? You pull me in, then get bored when it gets complicated. I lose my job, my name." "No," he said firmly. "You set the pace. You tell me what's real. If it's nothing, I'll accept that." She studied him, his posture, his breath, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. And then she kissed him. It was slow at first, like testing a spark to dry wood. But then it ignited. His hand curled around her waist, pulling her in, while her fingers threaded into his hair. Months of tension unraveled in a single stolen moment beneath the stars. When they broke apart, Isla stepped back, breathing hard. "I want this," she said, voice trembling. "But I want to be more than a moment for you, Alexander." He reached out and brushed a curl from her cheek. "You already are." She turned, heart racing, and walked back inside, leaving him breathless. A week later, the rooftop kiss still played on repeat in Isla's mind. Her body still remembered the press of his hand on her waist, the way his lips trembled for control, even as passion took over. But what followed wasn't chaos, it was clarity. Alexander hadn't tried to rush her. He hadn't cornered her into private dinners or late-night texts. Instead, he showed up every day at the office like nothing had changed, except everything had. And Isla noticed it. In the way he looked at her during meetings, in how he listened when she spoke, really listened, in how her designs for the Emerge project were suddenly prioritized, elevated, championed. But she needed more than his attention. She needed his honesty. The Emerge project was officially launching that night, with a showcase and benefit auction at a private gallery in Soho. Isla had worked for weeks, pouring her ideas into each piece, sketching, stitching, fine-tuning fabrics with a local seamstress in Harlem. This wasn't just fashion. It was identity, legacy, healing. She stood backstage wearing a fitted off-shoulder jumpsuit she'd designed herself, powerful, sleek, unapologetically black. Models buzzed around her, makeup artists fluttered by, but her heart was steady. She wasn't the assistant tonight. She was the creator. Isla. She turned. Alexander stood by the curtain, dressed in a midnight black suit that made his pale skin glow under the gallery lights. No tie, just sharp lines and stormy blue eyes. He looked at her like she was the art. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Better than okay. I'm ready." He stepped forward, voice lower. "I meant what I said. That night on the rooftop." "I know," she replied, "but I don't want to be the woman you notice after one unexpected moment. I want to be the woman you choose every day, even when it's inconvenient." Alexander paused, his expression tightening like someone pulling open an old wound. "My ex-wife used to say I only gave half of myself, that I was too distant, too focused on the company, and she wasn't wrong." "Then why are you here?" Isla asked softly. "Because when I saw you, yes, in that moment, yes, undressed, I wasn't looking at your body. I was looking at someone completely unafraid to be seen, someone who didn't flinch, someone real." His eyes held hers. "You terrify me," he whispered. That surprised her. "Why?" "Because I want you. Not for a night, not for a distraction. I want to wake up next to you and see what you'll say. I want to challenge you and be challenged back. And that means letting go of every wall I've spent years building." She looked at him for a long, still second. Then she smiled. "Good. I don't want a man who needs a pretty face to fill his silence. I want a man who can sit with my storm, their hands brushed, not a kiss, not yet, but a promise." The show began with a burst of rhythmic drums and soft ambient lights. The runway was framed in living greenery, a nod to sustainability and rebirth. Models of all shades and sizes walked the stage in garments that echoed culture and modern edge. Isla's designs, bold fabrics, gold accents, Afrocentric cuts paired with futuristic lines, brought the crowd to their feet. Alexander watched from the front row, flanked by investors and press, but his eyes never left the woman who had made it all happen. After the final bow, the applause swelled. Isla stepped out from behind the curtain, hesitant at first, but the cheers only grew louder, a flash of camera bulbs, a sea of claps. And then she saw him, Alexander, standing, clapping the hardest. Later that night, they found themselves alone in his penthouse, high above the sleeping city. He poured 2 glasses of wine, but Isla barely touched hers. The tension wasn't nervous, it was magnetic. "I didn't expect to feel this way," she said, stepping closer. "Neither did I." She reached up and brushed her fingers across the collar of his shirt. "You didn't come into my life gently, Alexander." "I don't do gentle well," he admitted, "but I'll try for you." He kissed her then, not like that first rooftop kiss, desperate and questioning, but with conviction, slow, certain. His lips tasted like truth, her hands tangled in his shirt as he deepened the kiss. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her across the room past the glass windows and city lights, into the warmth of his bedroom. They undressed not in a frenzy, but with reverence. Every button, every touch, a conversation. His hands trembled when they found her skin, like he couldn't believe she was real. Their bodies moved together like they'd done this for lifetimes. And when they lay wrapped in each other, breathless and bare, Isla whispered, "I've never felt so seen." Alexander pressed his lips to her forehead. "That's because I'm finally looking with my whole heart." Weeks passed. The Emerge project exploded in popularity. Fashion blogs raved. Isla was profiled in an industry magazine, the new voice of power dressing. Her old neighborhood celebrated her. Even her high school art teacher reached out. And at work, the whispers came too. "Isn't that the CEO's assistant? Must be nice having powerful connections. She came from nowhere and now she's designing entire lines." But Isla didn't shrink anymore, because she had come from nowhere, and she was good. She'd earned her place. Alexander stood by her through it all, never possessive, never controlling, just there. A steady, quiet support. The power couple no one expected, but no one could deny. One afternoon, as she prepared for a community outreach shoot in Harlem, he walked into her office holding a rolled-up blueprint. "Is this another surprise project?" she teased. "No," he said, eyes shining. "It's a studio, for you, in Soho. Rent paid, your name on the door. You can launch your own line." Isla froze. "But I'm still with Vance," she said. "You don't want me to leave? I want you to build your future, your way. I'll support it, even if it means watching you fly without me." She stood and walked around the desk, heart pounding. "You want me to choose you, but you're not afraid to let me go. Because love shouldn't feel like a cage," he said. "It should feel like wings." She kissed him again, softer than before, but just as deep. 6 months later, Vance Enterprises partnered with Isla R, her new brand. The Emerge project expanded to Paris. A scholarship was created for young black designers, and the fashion world now knew a new name: Isla Ramirez, founder, creator, muse. In an interview, when asked how it all began, she smiled thoughtfully. "It started when I was caught changing," she said, lips curving. "But he wasn't just looking at my body. He saw me. And somehow, that changed everything." The soft hum of morning jazz filled the bright kitchen as the scent of cinnamon and vanilla wafted through the air. Light spilled through the tall windows of the Soho loft, casting a golden glow across the white marble countertops. On the breakfast island sat a small sketchbook, open to a new bridal design, bold yet romantic, just like the woman who had drawn it. Isla Ramirez Vance, barefoot and glowing, stood at the stove flipping pancakes, her curls pulled up in a messy bun. She wore one of Alexander's button-down shirts, far too big for her frame, but perfectly comfortable. Her belly rounded beneath the fabric, 6 months pregnant. "I told you I was supposed to cook today," came Alexander's voice from behind, groggy and laced with sleep. She smiled as his arm slid around her waist from behind, hands resting over her bump. He pressed a kiss to her neck. "I got hungry," she teased. "So technically this is self-defense," he chuckled. "I've created a monster." "No," she said, turning to face him. "You created a safe place. For me. For us. For everything we didn't think we deserved." He kissed her, soft and slow, like he still couldn't believe she was real. Even now, after 2 years of marriage and a baby on the way, the buzzer rang from the intercom, followed by the familiar voice of her younger cousin Balack. "Auntie Isla, I brought the fabric you wanted." She laughed. "My studio assistant has arrived." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Do I need to start paying him?" He said pancakes were enough. Alexander walked toward the door to buzz him in, glancing back at her once more. "You know, sometimes I still think about that day." She arched a brow. "The day you walked in on me changing?" He grinned. "That's the one. It was the most unexpected moment of my life, and the best thing that ever happened to me." Isla laughed. "It was supposed to be my worst moment. But I guess fate had a better idea." He crossed back to her, resting his forehead against hers. "I didn't just fall in love with you that day. I found myself in the way you didn't shrink, in how you stood tall even with nothing to hide behind." She kissed him again gently. "And I saw a man who didn't run from vulnerability, who looked and stayed." Outside, Malick's voice echoed through the stairwell, shouting about how he'd brought extra swatches and a strawberry smoothie. Inside, laughter filled the loft, sweet and full, and in the corner of the kitchen, the sketchbook flipped closed in a soft breeze. On the back, written in ink, "Caught in a moment. Now, forever." Thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel. Your love, comments and shares mean everything to me. Grateful for each of you. Let's keep growing together.